All right, welcome back for the Eflight Viper Jet turbine conversion. This is going to be episode 2. Um, let's talk about I mentioned yesterday about pressure checking the fuel tank before you install it, okay? I'm going to unscrew the fitting here. I supply the Clunk, the Sullivan ProFlex line, which I really like. Um, I like to safety wire it myself as personal preference. I also wipe a very thin coating of DC 55 on the O-ring and the fitting in here before it goes in for the last time. Make sure it's clean. And oh, make sure you orientate it. I got an arrow on the top of the stopper here so that when it tightens up, that's at the top. I'm going to show you that. And the reason I like to do that, okay, see arrows at the top. So now when you look at the Clunk, I want to make sure that my safety wire tail is pointed up so it's not constantly rubbing up against the bottom of the tank, which it is. It's just something that, it's going to slide back and forth God knows how many times. You just don't want that wearing into the gel coat of the tank. So I like to put my tail pointed up. So putting the tank together, make sure it's clean. I flush them out a few times just with water, let it all evaporate. Put it in for the final time, once again with the lubricant on the O-ring. Tighten it up. You don't got to get carried away, just pretty much hand tight. Then I immerse it underwater. I pinch this line here. I blow on that one and watch for bubbles. There should be none. If there is, they need to be addressed before the tank goes in the model. 99.9% of the time, you're not going to have any issues at all. I check them before I send them out. They should be fine. I went ahead last night and I did bond this tank in after it was pressure checked. You can see just a little bit of ooze out of the Gorilla Glue. I mean, I don't need much, just a little line down this side here, down that side over there, and then there's a little bit on top where the tank is in contact with the model. You want the tank stabilized before you go ahead and start to fit the bottom piece. I'm not in the mood for that right now, so we're not going to do that. We're going to roll on to some other stuff. And another note, I enlarged this area right here with a sanding stick like that. And it just makes insertion of the wires a little bit easier to get them through this area. You got some more room. So, just taper that down, hold about 3/8 of an inch there, and it just makes life a lot easier to feed the wires through. We're going to go ahead and, so any questions about the tank, just leave a comment in the section. Once again, I supply Clunk and the Sullivan ProFlex when you purchase a tank. So we're going to attack these, the mounting flanges, damn it. The mounting flanges on the pipe. I don't do this. It takes me an extra 20 minutes or so. And I just rather the modeler do it that way. If the pipe is offset one way or the other, it's going to be your fault and not mine. So the way I do this is I take a compass and I set it just a little bit larger than the opening here, and I just draw a circle on a piece of cardboard or whatever, okay? And you want to pay note of where the center portion of that compass is. It should leave like a little impression. And then you just draw a line right through the middle of that dot. And that's going to be the center of the tail cone, okay? So what I do then is I like to orientate my seam on the top of the model. So doing this, the seam needs to be toward you and the flanges will be like that. And I do roughen up the area that the flanges are going to bond to with some, 80 grit or whatever, wash it off with some alcohol or lacquer thinner and clean it up. And we're going to tack this onto the board. Oh, and I put clear tape on here just to keep the hot glue from sticking to it. So I'm going to tack glue this pipe or the bell mouth on the center of that circle just to kind of hold it in place, making sure the seam is somewhat perpendicular to the line right there. All right, that looks good. So we're going to just put a couple dabs right there, right there. And we're going to do one in the middle up there. There's not much of a heat sink here, so the hot glue takes a while to dry. Okay, just make sure it's centered up as best you can. Walk away for a second. So I supply with the pipe two brackets like this. Okay, they need to be tweaked a little bit, to make them fit exactly. Okay, so when we bond these on, I want this flange here exactly on that line right there. Okay, so you can see we got a little gap there, so I'm just going to tweak this a little bit. Get it as best you can. That looks pretty good for me. Save time, I got 4 ready to go here. I cut them down a little bit. They don't need to be that long. It's just a little bit easier to form them when they're in a longer length. This flange here will end up being cut off to fit in the model, but leave it long for right now because it's easier to line it up on the line. So I bond these on with a JB Weld, and we're going to do that right now. So we're going to mix up a little bit of this. Okay. There we go. I'm going to do 2 pipes here because I'm working on 2 models. And then after we get these bonded on here, we're going to talk about the JP brakes for the rest of this video. So I roughen up these flanges with pretty coarse grit, like 50, so the JB Weld bonds. And after it's dry, we're going to install some fasteners into it. So basically, the JB Weld, it will bond it and act as like a liquid shim. And I'm going to load up a syringe. It just makes the job go so much neater. We're going to use the ones I got preformed. So there'll be a little bit, needs to be a little bit more JB Weld on one side than the other. I'll put it on a little thicker over here. So as you can see, it's right on the line there. Walk away. And with the hot glue on the bell mouth, it's not moving anywhere, and the hot glue will pop right off. Here we And then on the next video, we'll install the fasteners in these. You know, it's fairly critical to make sure the pipe is in line with the engine exhaust, and doing it this way, it's fairly accurate, and the engine will be on the same mounting plane as the tailpipe, so everything normally works out really well. If you get something off, you know, you can always shim it one way or the other. And then before this dries, I'll kind of neaten it up a little bit. But for right now, everything's looking good. We're going to move on. Once again, we'll do the this in another video. It's something you want to take your time with a little bit and do it right. You only get one shot at it. Okay, let's go talk brakes. To the struts that come with the Viper Jet. I'm normally used to working with free wing stuff, and Eflight or FMS, whoever built this thing, they did these way different than what I'm used to. There's no set screws holding the axle to the strut, and they must have it pressed in or something, and I'm not going to press it out and use the JP axles because I'm not quite sure how they're going to fit. And they didn't leave enough meat anywhere to really put in a set screw. So I haven't gone that route. The route I've been doing, it's been working great. I haven't had any trouble, so I'm going to keep doing it the way I've been doing. So let's talk about the JP wheels here. This model needs 65 millimeters, okay? Now, I got a set here that's a 65 millimeter 5 millimeter axle, and a set here that's a 65 millimeter 4 millimeter axle. The only difference in these axles is it's the same diameter going through the bearings. It's just that on the 4 millimeters, they put a little step and turn it to a 4 millimeter, okay? So, you know, if you got any questions, that's the main difference. And they also change it a little bit to where this has more of a boss here, and then this kind of has a recess on the 5 millimeter. I recommend doing the 65 millimeter with a 4 millimeter axle. I'm going to show you why. Now, if you don't do any work at all, you know, even though they say 4 millimeters, the bearings are all 5 millimeters ID, okay? So, you know, even you can't really just stick them on here without bushing it, okay? And then if you don't do any work to these, there's no room to put the snap ring on because, you know, the distance is off. Plus, you want the tire pretty much centered over the center of the strut. So it's not going to work like this. You know, you can tighten down your brake, but there's no way to retain the tire because the axle isn't long enough, and I'm not going to press it out. So what I came up with doing is I took the 4 millimeter brake, and I machined a slot in it that accepts the strut, okay, like that. So the brake, it can't rotate because it's trapped, okay? So you still gotta get this 4 millimeter up to the 5 millimeter OD that the bearings are, okay? Now, you don't want to use a piece of 3/16 brass tubing because it's like a few thousand smaller than 5 millimeter. So what I did, our hobby shop, they have metric brass tubing where this is 5 millimeter OD, this is 6 millimeter OD with a 5 millimeter ID, okay? So what I've been doing is this fits really nice on the bearings. I mean, it's like it's a beautiful fit. I mean, and that's what you want. You know, you want a precision shaft on your bearings. Okay. Now, if I was going to use the 3/16 tubing, which is a few thousand smaller, you're going to see it's got some wiggle in it, and that's no good at all. So, what I'm going to do is in my conversion kit, even though if you don't buy any brakes from me, I'm going to supply you with a couple inches of each piece of this tubing because it's kind of hard to find. So what I have to do is I have to cut a piece of tubing to fit over these axles. Now, even though this is a 4mm axle, it's really like a 3.8mm. There's just a tiny bit of slop in it, which I've been living with. It's been fine because the bearing's going to ride up against the brass tubing. So what I do, the first thing here is I need to cut a piece of this to the length, just a little bit shy of the snap ring groove, okay? So I'm going to cut it just pretty much right on that line. Now, don't go using a tubing cutter because a tubing cutter, it's gonna flare it in, and it's going to distort the tube to where the bearings aren't going to ride on it very well. So what I do is I take a utility knife with a sharp blade on it, okay? And I use that for my tubing cutter. So I'll line it up right on that mark there. I'm going to go a little bit bigger. And then try to hold everything nice and square. And then use some pressure. And it's acting like a tubing cutter that's super sharp, okay? And it just snaps right off. The trick is to have a sharp blade because they wear out pretty quick doing this. So we're going to slide that over the axle. I still got a little bit of the snap ring groove showing, which is good. So now I can put on my brake, and I'm going to point the wire to the front because I'm changing my mind a little bit. Everything fits real nice. You don't want to forget this washer. This washer is really important. Try not to lose them. That's got to go between the brake and the wheel. Like that. And then the tire can go on here like that. Okay. I got a lot of experience with these JP brakes. I mean, we're going to talk about the controllers in a minute, but they work fairly well for, you know, the price that they are. You know, I'm sure Electron brakes work a little bit better, but these are, you know, pretty economically priced. So I've been using them and they work great, and they're fairly inexpensive. So what we got to do now is if you look at this one, I got this one finished over here. We need to come up with another piece of brass tubing like this right here, and that's going to hold the snap ring at the right distance. And another thing with these JPs, you don't want any side end-to-end slop in this, okay? Because if you have slop there, it screws up the magnetism of the brake. So, you know, you don't want the wheel and the brake to be sliding inboard, outboard. You want it fairly tight, but you don't want it too tight to where it pinches the bearing so hard where it doesn't roll fairly smooth. So to get this next piece made, I just kind of got to eyeball it, and sometimes it takes a couple tries to get the right length. And then this tubing works really good because it's going to ride against the inner race, which is what you want. You don't want this tubing here to be touching the outer race because it's going to bind up and gall. So, you know, this 6mm OD works pretty good in this application. So I'm going to just try to get a rough line of where I want it. And once again, sometimes it takes a couple tries. And we're going to deburr the end of this. so it doesn't ride up against the outer race of the bearing like that. So we'll cut a piece here and see how it works, and if we got to make another one, it's not the end of the world. If anybody comes up with a better way of mounting JP brakes on these things, let me know. So I'll deburr this a little bit here. And we're gonna see how it fits. Yeah, it's all cattywampus. I'm about ready to start over. So you should have some room to slide the snap ring in. So I bought a whole bag of these. So, you know, I think you guys got the idea. Now this groove here, you know, if you want to go this route, I got a tool that I can machine this little slot, or you can, you know, or you can file it if you want. You know, I can do it for a nominal fee. It's not, it doesn't take much. Just let me know when you order parts, and I can set you up. I think I'm going to supply a set of brakes with the machining in here for like, I don't know, 120 bucks or something. The brakes are like 100 bucks by themselves. But that's pretty much what you want, and you want to make sure there's no end-to-end slop, or the magnetism is going to be messed up. So I might redo that one, but you guys got the gist of it, where that's what it's going to take to mount the 4mm axles to the struts. I wish they would have left some meat here where you could use the, you know, the regular axle and then just tighten down a set screw and you'd be done. But I don't think it's a good idea to be punching out this axle and then trying to insert this, because there's just no meat there for a set screw. So let's move on to actually put in the, running the wire to get it to here. I use a, I think these are called JS, I don't know. The wire, the ends that come on the brakes, I think they're JST connectors. I poke a little bit, a little hole. Here, let's look at this wing over here because it's not done. I poke a, they really got this wrapped up in here. I mean, they got such a mess of wiring in there. It works, but it's, I'll leave it at that. I poke a hole right in the middle here and a corresponding hole on the model in the same location. And I mount the male connector out here, and I poke a small enough hole to where it can't go in all the way, okay? And then on the model, it's got a bigger hole for the female end of the JST connector to go through, okay? So we'll deal with that when we start running wiring. So to get the wiring, in here, I'm not going to do it again because I just did it on that spare, but I'm going to show you how the wiring routes. So I'm going to start running on that break over there. I ran the wire on the back. I'm going to start running it on the front because you got to watch that it doesn't pinch itself between the retract and the strut here. So in doing that, when I found that the best location is going to be running down here like this, okay? Just like that. And to get it from this point to this point, what I do is I just come up like a rough length, okay? It's going to be about that length there and there, leaving about an inch, okay? So I'm just going to cut the wire right there. All right. Now, I got to open up this slot here because the wiring's going to take this route along here. So I'm just going to take in an X-Acto knife. And I'm just going to open up this channel so that when you put the tape back, it's not going to bulge it at all. So I just cut about a 1/16 away and a 1/16 down from the existing wires. Like that. And then I pluck it out with the pliers. So then after you tie this up real nice and neat, well, let's get it poked through here. We got a little trick to getting it poked through. I take a piece of heat shrink tubing, cut a little notch on it, and then feed it up through here. And cut that off. And I open it up a little bit. Jam that down in there. There we go. So I'm not going to tie this up. I'll let you know, it's not rocket science or anything, but you know, I get the wire to nestle down in there the best you can. Oh, and before you do that, you got to take this end here and just solder that together right there, and small heat shrink tubing, and then you'll be able to tuck in the excess back there. So I just get this down in there as best you can, solder that together, and then shove it. There's room in there for it to go back up in there, and then you screw this back on there. We'll run this gear right here. We'll show you that. Before we do that, you gotta take the cover for this thing here, and you gotta make like a little relief for the wire to go in. So I just dremeled out a little area here, and then right here, which gives some relief for the wire. Don't go pinching the wires if you can help it. So what that does is this will nestle down in there very nicely without pinching the wires. So if we look over here, when we run it, plug this thing in here. I mentioned it's probably better to have the wire come off the forward edge. So I got the wire running around the front of the fork, because if the wire runs straight down the strut, it gets pinched between here and here, and it hangs the gear up just a little bit. So, as you can see down in here, the clearances get pretty tight. If you want to relieve a little bit of foam right there, that's fine. Doors are still fitting nice, nothing's pinched. But you can see, that relief cut is doing its job right there. So, my prototype, it's been working fine, so I don't see really any reason why I'm going to change it. So, how many minutes are we up to?
31.
Okay. All right, so, and I've had a few people ask me, and email me and ask me, before we talk about price, let's talk about the brake controllers. The way I see it, you got 3 options. I'll give you the pros and cons of each one. This is the one that comes with the JP brakes. It works all right, but it's either on or off. That's it. There's no adjustment to it or anything. And it works, but it locks up the wheels. And these rubber tires, they can stand it. They don't really flat spot too bad. So, it works okay. You got the Zycoy controller, which, it used to be my favorite. It works really well. What's neat about the Zycoy controller is you can punch in different settings, and it like pulses it like anti-lock brakes to where the brakes don't skid. The problem is it sometimes, not all the times, but sometimes it's hard to get the right and left brake braking evenly at the same time, and when you hit the brakes, it veers. It's tough to diagnose a problem. I've tried adding shims and taking out shims, and I don't know if it's because one magnet's stronger on one side than the other. It works very well when they both break evenly, and I've had guys that try to put one of these on each brake, and so you can tweak them with the ATV on your radio, and it works. It can be a headache. What we've been using lately is this AG63. It's got like a gyro in it, and the nose gear steering is plugged into it also, and they've been working really well. I mean, you can set it on takeoff. You can set it on the trajectory that you want, throttle up, and you can pretty much let go of the stick, and I mean it holds it because it works the brakes and the nose gear steering at the same time. On landing, the brakes work fantastic as long as you're not giving it steering input while you're trying to brake. If you're just braking without steering input, I mean, it brakes straight as an arrow. But I think it's because the nose gear steering is tied in with the brake gyro. Things don't get along sometimes, but if you brake without moving the rudder or the nose gear and steering, they're great. So this is pretty much my go-to gizmo right now. first price wise, this one's free because it comes with the brakes, and the JP and the the AG63 and the Zykoy, they're pretty much about the same price, about, I don't know, 50, 55 bucks. So this is going to be my go-to one here, and you can actually tie it into your nose gear retract also, so that when you hit the nose gear retract, it shuts off the brake gyro. So it's got some really neat features to it. It's a neat little item, and works great. You can orientate it 4 different ways in the model and set it up, and it's a neat little unit. And I just been hooking it up to the balance lead of a 2-cell LiPo, and brakes and everything work great. So it looks a little complicated, but the instructions are pretty well spelled out, on how to plug everything in. It just goes in between the steering servo, the retract servo, and then your brake in, which plugs in your brake port in the receiver. So it looks a little intimidating, but it works great. So next video, I think we'll install the work on the bottom part of the fuselage, and install the fasteners and the tailpipe. And I was going to talk about price and all the parts too. I plan on selling the complete conversion kit, which includes the tank, the pipe, all the little miscellaneous stuff. I got a guy laser cutting me the tailpipe ring, the engine mounts, a tool to cut the engine mounts, and I'll be giving you like the brass tubing and the clunk, and I'll have it all out here on a bench before all this series is done. And but the price is going to be right around $300. That's what it's going to take. And then, I can sell you the brakes for 120, with the modification if you want to go that route. And then I can also sell you the UAT for 45 bucks. We're going to talk about that, and a little cradle that I make for these in upcoming videos. Okay, thanks for watching.